Financial Planner, follow us on YouTube.
The Cabal initiates the first event. Let the games begin. Let's get into the economic collapse, political and geopolitical news. Now, the Cabal looks like they're getting very nervous. Now, remember, social media, the alternative media, the internet in general, allows people to talk about things outside of the corporate media. And the corporate media started off with, all this alternative media, whatever you're seeing on social media is fake news. They tried to go down that route, tried to convince people that what you're seeing was fake and what we're handing you is real. Now they're becoming even more worried because what we're seeing right now, and we see that Facebook has stopped their, fake news checking system because it really doesn't work. And it was fake from the beginning. And we know that corporate media has been pumping out a lot of propaganda, which turns out to be fake news. Now, former U.S. President Obama has warned against the irresponsible use of social media. He was giving an interview, and he's saying that, listen, social media, the internet, is distorting people's understanding of complex issues and spreading misinformation around the world. Now, what he's really saying is that what they were trying to do, where they were trying to spread misinformation using the corporate media, isn't working anymore, and people are turning towards social media, turning towards alternative media, trying to find out the truth. And people are starting to learn about the truth through these different platforms. And he's saying that all of us in leadership have to find ways in which we can recreate a common space on the internet. He expressed concern about the future where facts are discarded and people only read and listen to things that reinforce their own views. One of the dangers of the internet is that people can have entirely different realities. They can be cocooned in information that reinforces their current biases. Well, this is exactly what they were doing. And what is happening is they're losing the narrative. They're losing the push of this misinformation, the propaganda that they've been pushing out there. And a lot of the things that they've been telling us turns out to be fake, phony, and false. And we're starting to break it down, and we're starting to realize that, yes, everything that we've been discussing, everything that's been pushed out there, we have been analyzing, we've been researching, and we've been noticing that what they were saying compared to what we were looking at completely do two different things. And the alternative media, the social media of those people that are pushing different stories out there, they're based in reality, and the propaganda is not. Now, the corporate media, they were supposed to be pushing out facts. They were supposed to have information that backed up their facts, linking it to it, or providing where they got these facts from. But a lot of times what they do is they just give information backed by nothing. It's propaganda. And they usually use words like, an unnamed, anonymous source. We have no documents or facts to back this up. The whole Russian collusion things, they had nothing to back it up whatsoever. They just made it up out of thin air. And then when you start digging, you start to realize that all of this has turned out to be fake. And this is why he's out there right now, because they're very nervous. Because when investigations start and they look into the backgrounds of what they've been doing, the spying, the Uranium One, the pedo ring, the child trafficking, and everything else, and you follow the money, you follow the real facts, you start to find out the truth. This is what they really don't want to happen. Every time in the past where they presented anything like Assad is gassing his own people, they never could show proof. They only show the aftermath. Showing the aftermath is not proof. It's like showing an earthquake that happened in a city, saying that this was done by a nuclear weapon. And they're just showing you the aftermath. Well, where's the link to the nuclear weapon? Where's the radiation? Where's the link? Who shot it? Where did it come from? Do you have satellite imagery? Nothing like that. And they do this with everything. Assad gassing his own people. Yes, they showed people that looked like maybe they were gassed, they were in a hospital, maybe something happened, but where's the evidence of who did it? They never could produce that. And that's how you know it's propaganda. We see right now, and we mentioned this in a report a couple days ago, where satellite images showed a Hong Kong ship giving fuel to a North Korean ship. South Korea said they used U.S. reconnaissance satellites and they captured this. Now they've taken the ship into custody and they're holding it, saying that yes, they were transferring fuel. Now China's out there saying this is absolutely not true whatsoever. This didn't happen. We don't know what you're talking about. And once again, North Korea, it doesn't really matter because North Korea will always find a way to get fuel, to get currency, to get the supplies they need. Iran has been doing it. Syria has been doing it. North Korea is doing it. Cuba has been doing it. There's always a way around all of this. And this is what these individuals in the U.S. don't understand. The cabal is that sanctions really don't work. They never have. It sounds great on the corporate media. It sounds great that this is what they're doing. But they don't work at all. And there's proof that they don't, because there's always a way. There's always a black market for everything. And again, if somebody really needs something, they'll pay for it. We see Russia and Turkey, they sign loan agreements on the supply of the S-400 air defense system, and it looks like Turkey is going to be taking delivery very soon, and they're going to be getting the S-400 air defense system in their country. We see there's this story out there that the U.S. and Israel reached a joint strategic plan to counter Iranian influence in the Middle East. Now, again, this is something that they put out there, and the cabal wants everyone convinced that there's some type of strategic plan. Now, the plan has always been the same. Go into Syria, have regime change. Go into Iran, have regime change. And we knew that the cabal, they were preparing to do something very soon, because their entire goal was to have regime change in Iran. If they can get Iran to fall, they're thinking they can go back to Syria and have regime change there. Now, what's very interesting is Iran has been under sanctions for a very long time. They've had the P5+1 deal, which doesn't allow them to acquire nuclear weapons. Now, what's very interesting is that this U.S.-Israel strategic plan is to make sure that Iran never gets nuclear weapons. Well, the P5+1 deal makes sure that they never get nuclear weapons. It was put into place on purpose so they could have regime change. So this plan that they have, the strategic plan, that first part is already done. They're also saying they're going to counter Iranian activity in the region. We'll talk about that in a little while to see what Iran is doing in the region to see if that holds water. They're going to be countering Iranian ballistic missile development and the Iranian precision project aimed at manufacturing precision-guided missiles. That is not covered under the P5+1 deal. They just don't want them to have any type of systems that can, fire a weapon into other countries. Now, it looks like they're not going to be invading Iran because they have the S-300, S-400 systems that they purchased from Russia. And we could see that they needed different ways of getting in there. Now, what is happening right now is Iran is looking for ways to get around sanctions. And they're looking at the cryptocurrency. So is North Korea. So is many other countries. They're looking at cryptocurrencies where they can use this to get around sanctions. Venezuela is looking to set up a petro cryptocurrency to sell oil. And this is one way where they can get around all the sanctions that the U.S. places on them. And they need to stop these countries before this happens. Now, what's very interesting is that at this moment, all of a sudden, Iran is having protests that is occurring in different cities around Iran. And I think it's about 6 different cities where people are rising up and they're very upset about the government, about the economy, and they're screaming that we need to have regime change, we need to get rid of our leader. And this fits into the same exact model that has been used over and over and over again. Here is the first event, and it has just been initiated. What they do is they bring in these protesters from the outside or inside the countries. They start, it's a small group. It's not hundreds of thousands of people, it's not millions of people, it's small groups, and they spread them around the country. They tried this with Russia and China already. And what they do is they get the people going. And what they hope is that more people will join this movement. And if they can get more people to join this movement, that means they can get it off the ground where they can push a regime change. Now, a lot of the corporate media is not really saying much just yet. Some of the corporate media is saying, ooh, it looks like something's happening in Iran. We might be seeing regime change there. Remember, this was the last country they wanted this to happen, and we knew they were going to try to do something. And we need to look at the entire situation. Iran is working with Russia and China. They're selling their oil outside of the US dollar. They're working with Russia and China. They're making economic deals. They're joining their systems, and they just recently joined Russia's economic system. And we see that they're looking to use cryptocurrencies to bypass sanctions. And it just so happens that all of a sudden there's protests going on at this exact moment where they needed to start something. So this tells us already that this has been manufactured to make us believe that this is happening. And if you look at the pictures, yes, there are people out there, and of course this is their groups that they pay, and this is from the intelligence agencies. A lot of times Soros is behind all of this, and they use this to build momentum. Now, let's go back to the part where they're saying that Iran, they are, pushing different terrorist groups around the Middle East. Now, 13 of the 14 Muslim groups identified by the U.S. intelligence community as actively hostile to the U.S. are Sunni, not Shia, and they're not supported by Iran. Now let's take a look at these. The Islamic State, Sunni. Al-Nusra, Sunni. Al-Qaeda Central, Al-Qaeda Maghreb, Al-Qaeda Arabian Peninsula, all Sunni. Boko Haram, Sunni. Al-Shabaab, Sunni. This new, that new Khorasan group that they all of a sudden came up with when they were invading Syria, trying to go after the Islamic State, that's Sunni. So the Society of the Muslim Brotherhood, Sunni. The SAIF group in the Philippines, Sunni. Taliban in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Sunni. And the Houthis, they're Shia. The Houthis are the only group. The rest were created by the U.S., Israel, Saudi Arabia, the coalition forces. The terrorist groups that they're citing are not Iranian. They're from the U.S., Israel, Saudi Arabia, yes, Qatar, Jordan, and the rest of the coalition forces, the UK, the rest. That's where the terrorist groups are from. So Iran is not a sponsor of terrorism in the Middle East. Actually, Iran was invited into Syria to help fight the Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, the other terrorist groups that were there. And if we go back in time, we can see that there were terrorist attacks inside of Iran that were sponsored by the U.S. They were carried out by the U.S. Joint Special Operations Command over the past 30 years. And if you look at this, we can see that it's the United States, Israel, the coalition forces that have been pushing terror in the Middle East. All of this is to convince you, and the corporate media just keeps repeating it, that Iran is the sponsor of terror in the Middle East, when actually it's the opposite. They're trying right now, the Cabal is trying to push some type of regime change in Iran. They know they can't invade Russia and China, back it up, so they're trying this tactic that they've used in Ukraine. They tried to use it in Syria. They use it in Iraq. They use it in Libya. And eventually, if they can get something off the ground and they can get all of this happening, most likely the U.S. is going to try to get involved in helping these individuals, which I mean by the Cabal, is going to try to push the agenda in Iran, to push it along. And we see right now, this is what they've been trying to do. And this is their first attempt of their first event to try to start war. This is eventually what they want. And remember, they never give up on their goals, because remember, they were trying to go through all the Middle East, have regime change in all these countries, into Syria. The last country was Iran. Now they're going to try to go into Iran and work backwards. Remember, the P5+1 deal was to make sure they never got nuclear weapons. If they had nuclear weapons, there could be no invasion of Iran. They won't invade a country that is nuclear backed. And they needed to make sure that they weren't going to be nuclear backed, because in Syria it was taking a very long time to have regime change. Syria right now is kind of out of the picture, so they have to skip over Syria, go to Iran, and we can see they're trying in Ukraine, they're trying in Iran, and North Korea. They keep rotating, and it looks like this is the first part of the event where they're trying to push something to happen here. We're going to see a lot more of these in 2018, because what we're seeing right now is things are rapidly falling apart. We see that U.S. helicopters have evacuated the Islamic State leaders from several areas across the Syrian province of Deir ez-Zor, and this is coming from reports of residents who are living in the area saying, yeah, the U.S. flew in, the Islamic State leaders boarded the plane, the helicopters, and they removed them from the area. We've been seeing this quite often. Russia has evidence of all of this. And what is happening right now, evidence is coming out which is proving that the Cabal is behind the Islamic State and all those terrorist groups. Because remember, all of these groups were created by them, and they're paid covertly by them, some right on the books. But we could see right now they are using these paid mercenaries to blanket the Middle East and have disruptions in the Middle East. So here we are right now. We're at the end of 2017. We knew there was going to be some type of an event. We didn't know what it was going to be, but we knew they were going to try to start something. So all of a sudden, out of nowhere, we see that there are protests in 6 or 7 cities right now. It's a small handful of people that are out there, and they're trying to push something out in Iran. Now, is this going to work? Most likely not. It looks like China and Russia, they tried out there to have certain protests, and it was locked down very, very quickly. And I think the same thing is going to happen. This is not a grassroots uprising. This is not something that just appeared out of nowhere. It's exactly the same playbook they've been using over and over. And I expect in 2018, we're going to see a big push in other areas, and they're going to keep rotating until they can't do it anymore, until everything is locked down. But again, they could go the next step where they have something even bigger once they see this is failing.